Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So my name is Matt Menchner. I teach 10th grade U.S. History at Kensington Creative and Performing Arts High School. This is my 5th year teaching, and over this summer I was fortunate enough to be a participant and fellow in Ian Shapiro's seminar, American Democracy and the Promise of Justice. And my unit is titled Chasing the Dream, the Civil Rights Movement and the Desire for American Equality. So essentially the core of my unit comes down to comparing and contrasting different political philosophies throughout the civil rights movement, and really embodied most by figures like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. So the perception of these two figures, what I've gleaned from conversations with friends, colleagues, former and current students, is that these two operate kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum. They're fixed entities, they never changed at any point, and they represent very concrete ideals. So you have someone like Martin Luther King, integrationist, right? Everyone should get along, very kumbaya. Then you've got Malcolm X on the other side, more radical, black nationalist, separatist. But the reality is much more complicated and nuanced. Really, their relationship to one another and to political philosophy is more like this, often coalescing, converging later in their life, but with a lot of ebb and flow and peaks and valleys. And so that's sort of the focus of the unit and what we're looking at throughout. So these are some of the books that really inspired me in writing this unit and helped me to really dive deep into it. The Cone book in particular, Martin and Malcolm in America, and I think the subtitle is really important there, A Dream or a Night, really embodies kind of some of the core ideals of the unit as well as both of their philosophies. So while Martin King saw America as a dream yet unfulfilled, Malcolm X saw it more as a living nightmare. However, their stances changed a lot throughout their lives and throughout their careers. So I've recently begun teaching the unit. What we started off with, though, is sort of a barometer to get students to think about their own political philosophies on some sort of general issues. Was a gallery walk activity where we had 5 different stations with just sort of general statements, some more inflammatory than others, posted around the room. They were given dots, and then on the left side of the poster, which you'll see in just a second, they were asked to put a green dot if they agree, a pink dot if they disagree with the statement, and a yellow dot if they're unsure or if they're kind of in the middle. And then on the right side, they would write a brief statement just explaining their reasoning why. So this was a really engaging activity. I always like to get students up and moving around, and it's really important to float around and just really create that dialogue with them. But we looked at statements like this, right? Anyone can be successful in America if they work hard and stay out of trouble. Very early Martin type of political philosophy, right? If you just keep your head down and work hard. So there was a range of different responses here. You can see, obviously, very colorful. But as we moved on, students' perspectives changed a little bit. So this question of laws being enforced equally for everyone in the United States, you can see we're veering more into the yellow and the pink, a lot of uncertainty, some disagreement. And then this one in particular, here we go. So obviously, students feel very strongly about this one. I don't know, one brave soul seemed to agree. Maybe they came from private school, I don't know. But this was a really great springboard into the first major topic that we discussed, which was Brown versus Board of Education, and specifically segregation in education. And so we looked at historical examples of Brown versus Board of Education. We looked at what happened with Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896, which declared separate but equal. And then we looked at how that was overturned in 1954 with Brown versus Board of Education. And then we also looked at the parable of the polygons, which was a module that Ian shared with us over the summer, which was based on Thomas Schelling, was a Harvard economist. It was based on his study in the 1970s about segregation and different causes of segregation. So the root question was, have schools truly been desegregated in the wake of Brown versus Board of Education? And through this assignment, through the gallery walk, through dialogue, and other assignments that we've done as well, ultimately students found not so much. And there are a variety of factors that cause that. But when they really dove deep into this and reflected on it, there were some pretty staggering responses that students shared relative to their perspective, their experience, and their perception. So these are just some of the standards that my unit covers, just a sampling, a little appetizer, if you will. There's many more here, but at my school and many schools in my district, there's currently a big push for writing and reading across the curriculum. So in my class, we do a lot of constructed responses. We're asked to read a lot of complex texts, think about them, really grapple with them, and some of the standards embedded in this unit help us to do that. Looking forward, we're going to be moving into really the lives and careers and political activism of Martin and Malcolm, and we're going to look at how their philosophies took shape over time, how they changed, how they were alike, how they were different. But one core activity that I'm really looking forward to doing with my students later on in the unit is looking at the Civil Rights Act and looking at how this really embodies the process of legislation. So the Civil Rights Act had to pass through pretty much every legislative barrier possible in order to be codified into law. And so I found this to be a really interesting way to teach the process of how a bill becomes law, and specifically how embodying that kind of integrationist mindset, how LBJ, the president at the time, played a huge role in getting this legislation passed and showing how the president can actually play a huge role in the congressional process as well. And then the culminating activity for the unit is going to be a class-wide debate or discussion using a Socratic seminar in which students get together, and ultimately what they're debating is whose philosophy was more prevalent in the movement, whose philosophy was more successful, who had more success in achieving their proximate goals, making them entrenched victories that they could then fall back on in order to achieve further goals. And this is something that myself and the 10th grade English teacher in my school are going to be working on. So I mentioned before writing across the curriculum, and we're going to be doing a lot to plan cross-curricular activities such as this, in which they do a public speaking unit simultaneously in his class and then bring those skills into mine for this project. And so we're going to be sharing some readings such as Message to the Grassroots by Malcolm X, I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King, and a variety of other texts that we'll be looking over throughout the unit. And so they're going to be coming in with that prior unit knowledge and then really using that to fuel the discussion as we have it in class. And so for me personally, researching and writing this unit was really educational. It really opened my eyes to a lot of misconceptions that I had about this period in history and about individuals who played significant roles in it. And so my hope is to do the same for my students, because I think that I can learn as much from them as they can learn from me. Thank you.